Hang on, guys. Good morning, everybody. I'm back. Hang on. I got to restart the video here. Hang on. It's just delay in for a second. Hang on just a moment. Be right back. Okay, better. Well, it's good to be back, back home in the U.S. As you guys know, if you guys, some of you guys know that I was out of the country in Portugal all of last week, and I saw you guys a couple of times. But the last 3 days, or three, actually, was it 3 days, 4 days, Saturday, Sunday? No, 3 days. I couldn't just because of being on a plane and various stuff. So anyway, it is good to be back. I weighed myself. I lost 1 pound. I was 254.8 when I left, and I was 253.8 this morning when I got home. So anyway, I mean, I pretty much, I don't know, eat what I normally eat. I probably walk a little more than I use. Well, I definitely walked a little more. We walked all over the damn place. So, but I ate 3 meals a day, but the portions were a little smaller. So it's about what I typically eat. So, and I stuck to basically beef, seafood, eggs, and a little bit of cheese. And that was my diet while I was over there. I was able to stay pretty much 100% carnivorous pretty easily. So it was quite, Portugal gets a thumbs up for ease of carnivory. And the nice thing about now, the unfortunate thing is I pretty much had to eat in restaurants pretty much 100% of the time. I did bring some dried meat with me, which I end up eating only about maybe a third of what I brought, because I mean, the restaurants did have meat. It was very easy to get meat. Now, the problem with that is it just costs more than if you're cooking at home. So, I mean, I'm not complaining that the food was problematic. It's just a little more expensive, but it was much cheaper than even eating out in the U.S. So, I mean, I would say it's legitimately probably about half the price of what I would pay in the U.S. for similar food. So it was good. And, I found one of the things I started after about the second or third day, and I noticed they keep bringing, like, they would always just bring in the sides were beans, rice, and French fries was like the side dish to just about everything, whether it was steak or something else. It was beans, rice, and French fries they'd bring in. I said, hey, and I noticed they were putting eggs on some of the dishes, like one of the Portuguese style steak had an egg. And I said, hey, can I just have a couple fried eggs instead? Everywhere I went, there was no problem. They had no complaints. I would just get steak and eggs typically, or if I had seafood. The few times I had seafood, I had octopus and squid and shrimp quite a bit, and they cook everything in butter, so which is kind of nice to see. Everything was butter everywhere. I would say on average the Portuguese people were fairly, I mean, I certainly didn't see any, like what I call American style obesity. You saw nobody like 300 pounds. I mean, literally no one in the country was there that I saw. Granted, I didn't see the whole country, but where I was, both in Lisbon, Lisboa, or all the other coastal towns that I visited, and some of those touristy places, and they generally, I guess they have a less of a processed food diet. It's not to say it wasn't there, but it was less in here, and they certainly, it definitely wasn't vegan centric. It was definitely very meat centric. Seafood, particularly in the coast, because I was on a coastal region. I was in a lot of these fishing towns, fishing villages, and so obviously seafood was quite ubiquitous everywhere. So, but it's good to be back home. I mean, the flight was, I can't sleep on those planes, and it was just it's always a it's a pain when I do it, because I'm usually uh we barely, so on the way out, our plane out of Seattle was delayed, so we got to Paris, and of course we couldn't make our connection, so we had to wait like 4 hours in the Paris airport to get down to Lisbon. Then on the way back, they delayed our flight out of Lisbon, which is at 5 o'clock in the morning, and so because our flight was at 5 o'clock in the morning, we had to drop the rental car off at 2:30 in the morning. So we ended up just not going to bed that night. We just kind of toured around Lisbon. It was really nice. We took a little tuk-tuk, these little small little cars, open air cars, and around. The driver was really a neat guy. He was kind of funny. It was interesting because he was like, uh, he was not happy with American politics, right? It's like, you got to vote somebody better in. Where all of us in Europe are praying for that, because they say they like U.S. being in charge. They don't want China to be in charge of the world. They're like, we want the U.S. to be in charge of the world, not China. So anyway, it was an interesting discussion to see how some of the Europeans felt about U.S. politics, and it was, kind of, I was kind of surprised to see how, much they did not like what the direction we were going in, which, because Portugal has an interesting history. It was, it was a monarchy from about the 11th century or 12th century through the early 1900s, I think. No, late 1900s, middle 1900s, and then they became a dictatorship. For about 50 years, had a dictator until about 74, and then had a revolution, and now they're a democracy. But the president, prime minister are both are socialists, and they're not happy. They're not happy with those guys. So it's interesting to see that. But yeah, so that was a little venture out to Portugal. So yeah, I thought it was quite. I'd never been before. It was, completely. I had no preconceived notions out of the few things I'd read briefly about it. I'd read that the driving was a nightmare, and I honestly had no problem. It was very easy to drive around there. I mean, a lot of roundabouts is so much in Europe, but I mean, and they work out pretty well. You get used to them very quickly. There's a few where I live around here, so. So all in all, we enjoyed it. We have my girlfriend has a good friend that lives there, and it was her birthday, and so we went and celebrated her birthday at a Argentinian restaurant in Lisbon called Paparucha, and I had the dish for two people. I had a lot of those dish for two people type of thing. This steak is for dois peso, two people, and I was like, I just want that. And well, it's for two people. I said, yeah, I know, but I ate a lot of meat. So anyway, and I ran. It's kind of funny. I ran into three people that recognized me while I was there. So there's one guy in a town called Cash. I was down there, and I was at a restaurant, and I posted out at this restaurant. I guess he came down to the restaurant to meet me because he lived in the town. So that was really nice. And then I saw two people on the plane back from, one I met in the Lisbon airport, on the shuttle bus to the plane. She recognized me, and we chatted for a little bit. And then one guy, as I was getting off the plane from Amsterdam to Seattle, he saw me on a plane and thought it was me and recognized me, and we chatted afterwards. He was from Sweden, nice guy. Lost about 58 pounds, I think he said, from doing carnivore. And so anyway, it's good to see the messages getting around the world. All right, so let's see. That's kind of a recap. If anybody got any questions on that, or anything they want to share, anything roundabout sound like Kansas? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think they facilitate traffic better than a stoplight does. I think the reason, my understanding is why they don't have it is because they take a lot of room. They take up more space, physical space to do it. I think it's more expensive to build one of those than it is just to hang a traffic light. But I may be mistaken on that. Maybe I don't know, we have any civil engineers in the room, but not sure what goes into the decision. But they have some roundabouts where I live. In fact, I go every time I go to jiu-jitsu. There's about 5 of them I have to go through. So anyway, I don't think I've seen too many roundabouts in West Texas, Charlie. You got any roundabouts there? Probably not. You got 2 stop signs in the town, maybe, or something.
No, they're beginning to put some in. They've put them in Midland. Problem is that nobody knows how to use them. So it's very confusing for people who've never seen one.
Yeah, just look left, make sure no one's going to blast you from the left side, and you're good to go, typically. So, yeah, I can't remember. I don't know how old I was when I first saw the first one I ever saw. It was, I'd grown up with stop signs and traffic lights and that type of stuff. And anyway, all right. So, what else is going on here, guys? Let me just bop on over to YouTube. YouTube is streaming too, and we got some people saying hi, and a bunch of hi people. Somebody saying, what is better, butter or beef tallow? Rate based on taste, nutrients, and overall. Well, I can't tell you on taste. I mean, I think probably butter tastes better than tallow, and, at least straight up, like I said. But I mean, as far as cooking in it, I mean, tallow definitely performs cooking better, particularly at higher heats. If you need something, in order to sear a steak appropriately, like a nice hot sear. Butter's not going to do it because it's going to turn brown and then black before it gets hot enough to do that. You can baste in butter. A lot of people do their steaks and all, because they often, like, if you look at a lot of the steak cooking restaurants, like if you're cooking in a hot pan or a cast iron pan, they'll tell you to put some oil, some high heat oil. They'll often use some vegetable oil, unfortunately, but you could use tallow, and then you just, or the fat that comes on the steak itself, sear it on high heat, and then a lot of people will, melt some butter in there with the heat just a little bit lower, and quickly spoon it over there to baste it. But as far as nutrients are concerned, I don't know. I mean, they all got fat soluble vitamins. I think more people have problems with dairy than tallow. I mean, I've seen that for sure. I mean, clearly there's more people that have sensitivities to dairy, and butter is kind of intermediate on the dairy scale. I mean, I think probably if I were to, rank most likely to be problematic to least likely to most problematic, I'd probably put straight up milk is probably the one that most people have problems with, and then probably ghee, which is clarified butter or butter without the milk solids, is the least inflammatory or problematic for those people that do have problems, and butter somewhere in between with yogurts and creams and all the other stuff, and or even maybe even more to the right, probably because more people tolerate butter than they do even things like cream and stuff like that. So, which is interesting because butter is just, heavily whipped cream. Basically, if you ever make homemade butter, you just, take some cream and you just whip it till it turns hard, basically. So, thoughts on the dairy explosion, cattle killed. I guess was it a secret government plot? No, I don't think so. I think it was just a big building, had a lot of methane buildup, and I think that's what happens. These dairy cows are out there farting and burping, and there is some methane. I think it was a problem with I don't know how they facilitate airflow in the room. I think that's really what it was. And so you've got, it's like a Hindenburg. You got all these animals. I mean, Hindenburgs were they helium or hydrogen? I think helium. But maybe no hydrogen. I don't know. What was the Hindenburg? Was it a hydrogen balloon? I don't know. I can't remember. But anyway, you get all this gas built up in an enclosed space, and I mean, some sort of thing goes on, and boom, you got a big explosion. So it is, it's just like, remember all the cows that died in, I think it was Kansas this summer. 5,000 cattle dropped dead from the heat. I mean, it's one of those things that happens to steak. I don't think it was, some secret government plot to take away meat or anything like that. I think it was just one of those things, one of those unfortunate things. And I'm sure the dairyman who, I mean, I don't know. I know they have insurance on that or what happens, but I mean, that probably may put them out of business or something. I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of cows under one roof. I mean, that's got to be a big dairy, 18,000 of them. I mean, that's got to be one of the bigger ones. I know they exist. I mean, but it's obviously a problem with that. So sad to see, any animals that die unnecessarily like that. Right. Okay. Anybody else got anything of interest? Eric Adams just announced that in New York City, I spent all morning making fun of this. I woke up at 1:00 this morning. I'm jet lagged. So I was just like, I went to bed. I was exhausted when I went to bed. Cause I literally, we stayed up all night. Remember, we stayed up all night, had to be here, to drop with the rental car at 2:30. Our flight was at 5 a.m. And I was in coach on the way, I was sitting there just cramped in there. And, my girlfriend and my little boy are up there in business class, and I'm back there in coach. And I was in there just crammed in there, like, like a little, in a window seat too, which is awful for me because I can't expand anyway. I'm like in this, like crammed in like a praying mantis with my knees bent up under me. And the captain announces, the weather is bad and we may not be able to take off, and we've been delayed 2 hours, and we're going to sit on the runway for 2 hours before we even leave. So that was, but they ended up sitting there for closer to an hour, but it was just not fun. I was on the way to Amsterdam. And so that, and then I get on the other flight and I can't sleep. There's just no way. I'm still, I was still in the back of the plane. And again, just no way I'm going to sleep. Even when the few times I've traveled business, when they've got the long stretch out things, I still can't sleep on those things. So I'm like, well, I don't eat the food. I never eat the food on a plane because it's always crap, and then I don't sleep. So I'm like, why am I paying for a business tech class when I can't sleep anyway? I'm not going to spend an extra, whatever, $1,000 or something. I mean, sometimes it's nice just to have it so you're not quite so crammed. Usually I end up getting the in between one. It just gives you a little bit more room so you're not so crammed in there, you know. But yeah, so I didn't get any sleep. And I got home. We ended up getting home around noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday. And I'd been at that point, I'd been up for about 30 hours. I'm like, well, I'm just going to power it out till as late as I can go. And I got to like, I don't know, I think it was 7:30. And then I was just out. But then I woke up at 1 a.m., you know, and I was like, oop, I couldn't go back to sleep. So I was on there on Twitter raising hell. And I saw Eric Adams posting about announcing that, you know, meat and dairy are the most emissions, and we are going to cut back our meat and dairy consumptions by 33% or something like that. So, you know, they basically all their city funded, whatever, jails, schools, hospital, whatever, they're going to try to push more and more of this plant-based nonsense on there. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, it's just one of those things where you're going to have more, you know, so the city becomes, for many people, unlivable. You know, I just laugh. I made a joke about that. You know, it's going to be, they've got really high crime. It's dirty. You know, now they're forcing this vegan crap on people. So people are just going to leave. You know, you're going to have, you know, the people that can afford to leave will leave, and then who will be left behind are the people that can't afford to leave. So you'll lose a lot of the population. You know, I mean, you're already seeing pretty, I mean, we're already seeing pretty significant migration. Some people that are, you know, ideologically opposed to that stuff are leaving to go to other places. So if you cut the population down by 10%, well, I guess your greenhouse gases will decrease. So you can, I mean, this is the thing. How do you, you know, it's like, what is your metric? You know, let's say Eric Adams says, well, we're going to consume less meat, and therefore we're going to contribute less to emissions. What is a metric you're going to measure just to say that you've been successful? You know, how many people log in, say they're not eating as much meat? What does that mean? Are you seeing savings in healthcare expenditures? Are you seeing the sea level is lower, right? I mean, what are they going to measure? And they're never going to measure it. It's going to be like one of those things, well, it could have been worse if you didn't get this or that, right? It's one of these impossible to measure outcomes. It's like, how do you measure that what you did actually made a difference, other than you just virtue signaling, right? I mean, there's no real way. And this whole thing is about it. It's just like, well, if the Statue of Liberty doesn't end up underwater, it's only because we told people to go vegan, right? Well, no, maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it wasn't going to happen anyway. But this is the thing when they have these impossible to verify outcomes, you know, and it's like, well, how do you know? So anyway, crazy times. So grain-based sales go up. Yeah, I mean, the good, you know, as much as I don't like the politicization of nutrition, you know, I think everybody, I don't care what your political leaning is, should eat a healthy diet. I mean, I think that should be primary, you know, it should be a primary goal of everyone. But because they are politicizing meat so much, we keep seeing these articles about meat being a right-wing conspiracy or something like that. It's shameful to see that, but and here's the caveat, but you know, half the country thinks that way. I mean, half the country would describe themselves as, you know, I mean, roughly, I mean, maybe 40%. There's 20% in the middle, whatever. 40% of the population will defend meat just because it's their team, right? So that's more than we had before. Before we had, you know, a few of us fringe nutty carnivores, you know, not even 1% of the population saying, hey, meat's health food, let's not take it away. So now we're seeing more people being more, at least, vigorously opposed to any reductions in meat consumption, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I'm not happy that it's drawn along political lines, but you know, I'd rather have, you know, 100 million people think that than, you know, a few 100,000, you know. So anyway, that's one good thing. We have a TV commercial. This is Alistair saying with your TV commercial here at the present shot. The announcer says, we know we should all eat less meat. Yeah, that's a problem. It really is. That is the foregone conclusion. You know, every scientific paper you see Well, we know that eating lots of fruits and vegetables and less meat is healthier, better for you. I mean, this is the foregone conclusion, which has never been tested thoroughly. I mean, it's never been clearly tested. I mean, it's all based on some really, really bad science, and it's accepted as if, that is somehow God himself, wrote it on one of the commandments, thou shalt eat less meat, and it is just not, it is not known. And I mean, we are all people that it's not working for us, right? I mean, we're eating more meat. And when I went to low carb Denver, I think I mentioned this last time. I'm going to do the same speech in KetoCon. So if you guys saw me in low carb again in Denver, I apologize for redoing it. I might put some twist on it, but I mean, I've done the same presentation. But at the beginning, I said, how many people, I said, step one, how many people are human beings? Raise your hand. So, everybody puts their hand up. I mean, there might have been one or two that didn't, but anyway, so you at least get all full participation. How many of you guys are human beings? And then I said, well, how many of you guys have started eating more meat in the last couple of years? And 75% of them put their hand up. And then I said, well, how many of you guys that started eating more meat, leave your hand up if you saw an improvement in your health? And pretty much everybody said their hands stayed up. And I said, well, how many of you guys stopped eating as much junk food? And pretty much everybody left their hand up, right? Which is what you'd expect. But then I said, well, how many of you guys ate less fruits and vegetables? And of that group, probably 80% of them left their hands up. So again, that's not a formal study or anything like that, but it's, it's saying, this is a group of, 500 people that are saying, I started eating more meat and I ate less junk food and I also eat less fruits and vegetables and my health got objectively better. That should not happen. If what we were told is true, there should be like two people with their hand up, two weirdos, but I mean, it was like the whole entire audience. And so, we're continuing to see that on a regular basis. Yeah, tell a lie long enough. Yeah, I mean, I said, what is the truth? Well, the truth is whatever the person with the loudest microphone or megaphone shouts the most. I mean, that's what, you say it, it's over and over and over again. I am fully convinced that if you told the people out there that the sky is actually green, it's not actually blue or whatever, black, depending on what time of day. It's green, right? The sky is green. Well, how do we know that? Well, because we have studies. We have studies, and it's not, while your eye might perceive blue, but it's actually green. You could gaslight people into doing that. But look, it looks blue. No, it's not blue. It's green. What is green? I mean, you can see this. What's the definition of green or something? You get people to say that, oh, okay, well, we were misled all these years. It's actually green, and I believe you could get, a certain percentage of the population to fall for that, as we see that they fall for such nonsense. Okay. This guy identifies as green. Yeah, I don't know what it identifies at. Okay. All right. And I don't see any new folks in here this morning. And I wasn't sure if we had a guest or not. Like I said, I'd been sort of let me go to the I'm going to hop over to the YouTube guys here because I know there's some folks listening here on YouTube. Let me see what we got. Some Jennifer from Texas saying she can't stay, but glad I'm here. Well, thanks, Jennifer. What else? Is it safe to eat 700 grams of ribeye and mince every day with 2 or 3 eggs, says James Fenway? Is it safe for me to eat 700, 800 grams of eggs? That's, you're looking at 1.5 pounds of meat and a couple of eggs. I mean, well, I don't know, man. If it ain't safe, I'm already dead. I mean, I eat probably double that every day. I've been doing that for years. So, I mean, I don't know, unless you're like a 3'6" little kid, it's probably okay. I think this is in the safety comes into what would we be worried about? So we'd be worried about, well, maybe I'm over consuming protein. And could you, like, toxic levels of protein in some situation? It's likely for most people. I mean, like I said, there's a number of studies have looked at very, very high levels of protein in people and have not seen any kidney issues, liver issues, any of that stuff. I mean, I guess if you had protein powder and you were just 2,000 grams of protein a day or something like that, and you could do that with protein powder, I think, you could just mix it up and drink it and drink it and drink it. You could conceivably do that. And I could see where you might have some problems with that. And you probably couldn't sustain that over a period of time. I mean, I just think, with meat, it's one of these interesting, particularly as whole cuts of meat, there's just a natural feedback on how much you can eat before you're just like, I don't want any more. I mean, there's just literally, there is a limit, like on a day when I'm really, 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 really hungry. Remember, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5". I'm 250 plus pounds. When I'm really, really, really hungry, I can eat 5 pounds of meat, maybe 6. That's a lot of meat. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of meat. And but I don't. But that's where I'm topping out. So I don't think I could eat 20 pounds of meat in a day, which is what it would take to get to 2,000 grams of protein a day. So I think there's a natural feedback inhibition of how much you can eat. I mean, just stomach capacity for nothing else. I mean, gut capacity. I mean, you start shoving 10 pounds of meat in your guts, and there ain't a lot much more room for anything else in there for a while. More or less appetite. I mean, the one time I ate 8 pounds in one setting, I mean, I didn't want to move. I mean, I laid there like a snake that swallowed a goat for like 6 hours on the couch going, I did that after I interviewed Cole Robinson, the snake guy, and he says, well, eat enough for 2 days and then fast for 2 days. I said, okay, I'm gonna eat it all in one setting. So that was about 8 pounds for me. 2 days of food was 8 pounds. And yeah, I mean, I think that level of meat is pretty typical, quite honestly. I mean, 1.5 pounds of meat and a couple of eggs. I mean, everybody in this group probably eats that. Some of the women eat more than that, hell. So anyway, there's the answer to that question. If anyone wants to comment, feel free to do so. CO2 in the atmosphere is 0.04%. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I talk about it. I read Alex Epstein's book recently, Fossil Future, and I interviewed Alex a couple of years ago, if you guys remember him. He's a guy, his hypothesis, or not, I don't say hypothesis, his sort of position is that fossil fuels are indeed contributing to global warming to a small percentage. I mean, it's causing that. What he objects to is what he calls is catastrophizing this, saying that if the climate raises up 1 or 2 degrees centigrade, what's going to happen? Is it going to be massive famine and starvation and flooding, and all these people are going to die? And he says, no, that's unlikely to happen. Because we have the capacity to deal with that, the temperature going in. And most of according to him, and I'm sure he's based on some science, most of those temperature increases will be felt in the northern regions and at nighttime and in winter. So what happens is your winter temperatures go up by 2 or 3 degrees. It goes up more at the North and South Pole by a couple of degrees, or in the northern climates where most people would like it to be a couple of degrees warmer. When it gets, when it's 30, 40 degrees below in northern Saskatchewan, people, you can't be outside. You can't be outside. And so if it was, instead of 30 degrees below, it's 20 degrees below, that's where it's likely to be more felt. I mean, that's what his book says. Now, I don't know the science based on that. I'm certainly not a climate or an atmospheric or, any of that type of stuff. That's not my background. But the other point, and again, I'm just relaying what he postulates in there. And the other thing he talks about is that, for all of the negative press about oil and coal and natural gas and all this stuff, those things have been able to bring billions of people out of poverty. I mean, they've, something like, I think he said something like 2 to 3 billion people on the planet today have access to less electricity than it takes to run your and I refrigerator. That's all the electricity they have for 2 to 3 billion people. So they can't, it's hard for them to have clean running water. It's hard for them to have any kind of climate control. Hard for them to do anything. So everything is manual labor. And so they're trapped in this cycle of poverty. And by having machine power run on fossil fuels, you can break this poverty. You can lift people out of poverty. And they've lifted, in the last 50 years, they've lifted, several billion people out of poverty. But then to go backwards will then be disempowering all these people, and so or denying the chance for billions of people to have a normal life, so that, you know, so that some guy on the beach's $2 million beach home doesn't flood a little bit or something. You know, it's just it's an interesting argument. It's not that climate change doesn't exist or there isn't any warmth that's going to happen, but any that'll happen, we are more than capable of dealing with. We have ways to deal with flooding. We have ways to deal with, you know, and it's not like it's going to happen overnight. It's like, you know, it's going to be like a very gradual thing. So you can shift the population centers inland from the coast a little bit if it were to happen. I mean, it's like the sea levels have risen, like, you know, it's in the term of inches per decade, not like every feet per year. It's like a few inches every decade. And it's like, well, you got time to respond to that, right? I mean, so anyway, it's just an interesting book. It's probably worth reading. I mean, I think, you know, I'm somebody who, you know, it's like, let's get different perspectives on this stuff and see if it makes sense. Because if they're like, you know, well, we're going to force millions, if not billions, of people to give up eating meat or dramatically cut back on that in order to, quote unquote, prevent this climate disaster, which, again, is it really going to be a disaster, or is it just going to be, you know, something that we can deal with? You know, do we have the mechanism by which to deal with that stuff? And it sounds like we do. You know, it sounds like we can, you know, fight back from this stuff if it even happens. You know, that's again, that's beyond my level of knowing whether it'll happen. I know there's people that are passionate, you know, it's kind of like they're passionately like what he points out is this 97% of all climate scientists agree. Well, it's 97% of the ones they asked, and they agreed that there is warming going on. But what they didn't agree to was it's a disaster and we need to act now. And it was just like, okay, it's happening, but is it really going to affect the planet in any meaningful way that's going to lead to millions and billions of people suffering? Or is it just, you know, something that's going to be kind of a mild nuisance and we just deal with it, you know, because, you know, right now, like, it's interesting, something like 10 times as many people die from cold exposure as they do to warmth. I mean, that's just the stats. I mean, more people freeze to death every year than ever die from heat exhaustion or heat stroke or, you know, these heat related climate change things. So it's kind of an interesting perspective. Again, I'm not an expert on this. I am not a climate scientist. I don't study this stuff. I don't know. There's no way for me to really verify this stuff. I'm just one of those guys. I'm just like, well, I don't know. I mean, so should we be racing to save the planet by doing something that potentially is going to harm the planet? It's going to harm me. I mean, why would I willingly cut back on meat when it would only make my health worse? What do I have? What do I have to gain from that? Nothing. I mean, you know, I don't want to be sick. I mean, that'll become a drain on society. Instead of being a productive member of society, that I become someone who's dependent upon the healthcare system. F that, you know. I mean, I've been in that. I mean, I've been part of the healthcare system. It's a waste of money. We waste money. Our healthcare system is a huge drain. It's a burden on our society more than anything, quite honestly. I mean, I think that's a fair to say. We don't get much return on our investment for the tax dollars we put into that. For the money that's invested in healthcare, it is a horrible investment. It does not pay dividends to the average person at all. We get nothing out of it. I mean, yes, it's great if you get in a car wreck, they can take you, life flight you to a hospital center and you may not die. But for most of it, it's a bad investment. All right, so all right, Kyle is asking a beginner question. This is a good question. It says, you know, where do I get a primary care physician that gets it, that isn't going to say, hey, plant-based diet, eat cardboard and take a statin, right? Well, like I said, I think June, that's the best guess I have now, June, so it's only a couple months away. We will open in all 50 states in Rivero, and you can have a physician that can help you, you know, to do most of the primary care related stuff. So that's the answer I'll give you that. I know, like I said, so that's that on that. So hopefully that will be helpful for anybody. All right, I'm gonna go back to, unless somebody on the group wants to ask a question, I'm gonna just keep popping over to YouTube and trying to answer some of these questions. Sauceman says, I like carnivore, but I'm borderline diabetic. Meat, eggs, proper diet, and exercise, weights works wonder. I don't know where the butt comes in. I mean, I think carnivore is great. I mean, I think I think for diabetes, I mean, low carb should be the default. I mean, I think that is, I mean, my gosh, I mean, that is probably one of the clearest indications for going low carb, and then I think there's a lot of other reasons why you might want to do that as well. But I mean, I can't tell you how many diabetics I've seen that have gone carnivore, near carnivore, or mostly carnivore, who have normalized their hemoglobin A1C. They've been able to come off most, if not all, of their medications. I mean, that to me, that's winning. And more importantly, many of them have been able to actually reverse the end organ damage that we see. I'm talking about diabetic retinopathy in their eyes. They go to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor will say, wow, that's weird. Your retinopathy, the vessels in your eyes that were damaged are now normal, or, they see their kidney function recover, or, whatever, there's a whole bunch of things. I mean, David Unwin, who I'm going to meet with in the UK next month, has published data on that, looking at people on low carb diets, higher protein, low carb diets, meat-based diets, literally reversing chronic kidney disease that were diabetics. And so this to me is not just masking the symptoms of diabetes, as the vegans will tell you, right? Well, you're just masking the symptoms of diabetes. If you were to gulp down and swill down 100 grams of pure glucose, your blood glucose would go high, and therefore you're not cured. Well, I mean, again, I would say whenever in the history of humanity would a human being out in the wild find 100 grams of glucose syrup to drink? I mean, you'd never find that. I mean, arguably you could say maybe there's a honeycomb or something like that somebody might gorge on once in a blue moon. But I mean, we're not designed to suck down pure concentrated glucose, and to say that's a physiologic, assessment. A mixed meal test is probably a better, that's another one people sometimes they'll do a response to a mixed meal test. That's probably a better assessment of what is supposed to be normal human physiology. But the fact that people are, normalizing hemoglobin A1C, coming off medications, and reversing end organ damage from going carnivore, to me, points to this is not only, beneficial, but potentially curative for these types of issues. Okay, so Charlie is, thanks for Charlie, because I just haven't had a chance to check that, and we talked last. So if you are interested in early, being an early member of Rivero, there is a waiting list that we have on Revero.com. So if you're looking for a primary care doctor and you want somebody that's going to work with you in a way that's not just, oh my God, your cholesterol's high, here, take this statin and stop eating meat, then that's a place you can go find up. So that will be something that be a good thing. Neil Patel is saying, are you going to KetoCon in Austin? Yes, I'm leaving Thursday night. And I will be in Austin Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then I'll leave out Monday morning. So yeah, I'll be there. I'm speaking. I can't remember what day I'm speaking. I'm probably on a panel, but I'll be in and out. I mean, I know there's a bunch of people in Austin who want me to do stuff. It's like, hey, come do this. So I'll try to do some, but I will definitely be at KetoCon for a significant period of time, probably each day that's open. I'll be there at least for most of the day or some of the day. So I will be super excited to meet, shake all your hands, say hi to you guys, give a big hug, high five, or whatever. And I'll be just super excited to say hi to folks. I always get a kick out of seeing people in person. As much as I like seeing you guys online, this is fun too. All right, let me see. Hummer Ramos is asking, are avocados good on carnivore, good for fat consumption, or just stick to butter and tallow? Well, officially, if you're eating avocados are not part of a carnivore diet. Now, certainly a lot of people on ketogenic diets have eaten avocados and done reasonably well with it. There are people, there are people out there where avocados just don't work for them for whatever reason, too much fiber, salicylates, whatever compounds that might be in avocado that some people will find problematic. Having said that, again, I'm not I'm far from a religious zealot about this diet. I think you do what works for you. Feel free to experiment with that. You know, if it works for you and it provides, you know, whatever makes it sustainable, whatever keeps you from eating garbage, you know, and I don't consider our avocados garbage. I mean, I think for some people they're a problem for sure. But I mean, I think if, you know, if that's something that, if you can do meat and eggs and a little bit of avocado and you're healthy, you know, again, that's the most important cap, and you get healthy, then go for it. Go for it. Now, I mean, you know, there's reasons why there are people out there that don't do well on avocados. And I never liked them. I mean, I remember the guacamole, I thought it looked like baby poop. I mean, I look at that stuff like, oh, I always hated, I never liked guacamole because it had all that crap in there, like tomatoes and all that other crap in there, people in there that I'd never liked anyway. But I mean, I ate my share of avocados on when I was keto. And I always kind of like, you know, I smothered them in enough olive oil and balsamic dressing, a little bit of salt. They weren't that disgusting to me. I never liked them. So I don't know. I mean, I know some people like them. So, you know, go for it if you want. All right. Anybody else got anything? All right. Just checking if I have to go here in just a little bit. Just checking to see. I just, whenever I get back into town, I'm always kind of like discombobulated for a couple of days trying to catch up on stuff. And my son has he's off, and so he's off of school today, and so he's here with me, and I'm kind of trying to, in between doing this stuff, kind of chase him around. So I've got him some fractions and stuff to do. He's working on multiplying and dividing fractions and stuff like that. So I wrote them in 4 columns. I put baby level, toddler level, little kid level, and then elementary school level. And he's a 5th grader, so just to put where he's at. So you know, kind of put them in order. So got to go over and check on those here in a little bit. But let's see. All right, so Neil is going to be at the KetoCon as a volunteer. All right, awesome. So I'm sure I'll run into you at some point. So it'll be good to say, you know, say hi. Okay. Anybody else got anything in the group here today? Okay. Coach Barber saying Lisa Wiedemann is going to be during the Q&A at KetoCon. Yeah, I guess I'm doing a Q&A. I can't remember what I signed up for, but that's fine. I'm happy to do whatever on that stuff. Let's see. So I'm just checking through a few other things here to see if I've got looking at my what do you call it, my consult calendar to see if I got I just got it, so I have to see if I have any consultations today after this, see if I have to run right away. Let's see. Oh, good. I don't have it this morning, so I have time. I can. Good. All right, good. All right, let me go back to you guys here. Charlie says, appreciate my wisdom. Well, I don't know how much wisdom I have, but Charlie, I'm happy to talk. And I'm glad you guys are here too, because you guys are the ones that make it a community. And so I know some days we have more, some days we have less. And I don't know I'm not sure what we're doing tomorrow. Let me just take a peek at the calendar and tell you guys. So if I can see if we have a guest tomorrow or Tuesday 18th. So I don't looks like unless this calendar hasn't been updated, but it looks like we don't have any guests this week at all. So it'll be maybe open I don't know, maybe I'll have to talk to Felice to see if she's scheduling anything. So that's good. All right. Try to go back to, where's the Zoom thing? There we go. Wait. Sharon C says, what am I doing wrong? 7 pounds the first week. Nothing the second week. Or Shannon C. I mean, I don't know if you're doing anything wrong. I mean, it's one of those things where, if your only metric by which you measure success wise is what the scale is, then I think, first of all, then, and I don't know, Shannon, this is a YouTube person. I don't know your story. I don't know how much weight you want to lose. I don't know what your history is, where you were before. I think that, whenever I talk to someone, whenever somebody does a consultation with me, the first thing particularly when it's weight loss, the first thing I talk about is, why do you feel you're overweight in the first place? How did you get where you are? And most of the time it has to do with compulsive eating, binge eating disorder, just eating the wrong crap. Right. And so that's why we get fat. I think, either we can't stop eating, or we eat for the wrong reasons, or we're certainly eating the wrong foods. And the wrong foods, there's a neat study that came out that showed that if you eat like hyper-processed food that mixes carbs and fat, it changes your brain physiology so that you want to continue to eat that stuff. So it literally makes you addicted to it. So you want to keep eating more and more of that stuff. And so the first question is, how do you stop eating that stuff? And for me, it's just like, that's the first goal in my view of doing a carnivore diet. Get to a point where you don't want the fill in the blank, the chocolate, the cookies, the cake, the pizza, the whatever it is. And how do you get there? Well, I just tell people eat enough meat so you don't want that stuff. And that's usually, and it may take a while for that to happen, 2 months, 3 months for some people. And then once you get to that point, irrespective of whether you lost or gained weight during that period of time, then you're in a much better place physiologically and psychologically to do what it needs to take to maybe lose weight. And, again, you may lose 7 pounds the first week, water weight, a lot of it. And then maybe you're starting to shift and some of the maybe there's some body composition change. Eating higher protein generally leads to heavier bones, thicker skin, heavier organs, all this is this lean mass starts to develop, and, I mean, because you think about it, well, you talk about, some people will say, I even feel a little bit more muscular. Now I've seen that. I mean, you might get a little bit more muscle. You're not going to get like jacked, like huge muscles just from eating carnivore. You're going to have to train to do that. But what about your kidneys? What about your bone mineral density? What about the thickness of your skin? All these protein dependent tissues that don't require, I think exercise probably helps to some degree, bone mineral density, things like that. But I mean, as far as some of this other stuff, I mean, what's making my skin thicker? Other than calluses, working with your hand. But so these things happen just from diet. So anyway, I'm gonna go to Kat because Kat had her hand up. Sorry, Kat, go ahead.
Oh, real quick, we're almost done. I just needed to report in. I think most of you guys know that I ended up with a case of shingles, but we were traveling when it came on, and I was living in a camper with no mirror, so was not able to see the rash starting. So ended up in the emergency room with level 9 upper abdominal right pain that everybody insisted was a kidney stone. So the emergency room did a CT scan. They did every test that you could possibly imagine, loaded me up with morphine and fentanyl. Nothing did it. The doctor absolutely missed the diagnosis, never looked at my abdomen, really didn't palpate much, and didn't listen to me, and ended up giving me antibiotics for an intestinal infection of some sort, which didn't exist. Just got my bill, just had to report to you guys. I was there for 4 hours, $26,000. Wow. And I'm self-insured. So yeah, needless to say, I am disputing it. I've already sent them a letter, and I would.
I mean, they didn't even examine you. I mean, it's like, here's the thing. I mean, to get, again, I as a physician, in order to submit for a bill for like a new patient exam, you're supposed to do a history and physical examination, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take a history, answer questions, review of systems, subjective, objective assessment plan. If they do an inadequate physical examination, they don't even palpate, you're complaining of abdominal pain and they don't even palpate your abdomen.
He poked around at my appendix and I'm like, it's not there. And he said, is it inside or outside? And I said, yes, it's both inside. That to me, now that I know shingles, should have been an instant, that sounds like shingles. And he never looked. He never did a visual, which I couldn't see it because I was living in the camper. And I mean, I had my husband look the next day and yes, there were lesions forming already. He would have found them. So 26,000, they charged me $11,000.
Where were the lesions at?
In my, around my right side of my rib cage, front to back, wrapped around.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's, again, you'd say, well, he didn't even look at me. It's like it was not even a proper physical examination because part of that is, and this is the one thing, you kind of get into this, well, if you undress the patient, is it awkward? Is it, inappropriate? It's one of those things, but honestly, in order to properly evaluate someone, you need to see what the hell you're doing. So, because if he would have had you lift your shirt up or take your shirt off or whatever, you put something, something to cover your breast.
I had a hospital gown on. He could have easily looked, but the fact that they charged $11,000 for a CT scan that costs locally 800 or 1,000 is outrageous. These charges were insane. Infusions, I don't even know what they gave me. $1,000 for an IV, for one IV infusion. They listed like 5, which I need to call and find out what that.
They piggybacked on all the drugs, the morphine and whatever, if they put Toradol on there. So, it's outrageous, it's ridiculous. And, if you had insurance, it would be negotiated for insurance. Insurance bill would have been probably like 4,000 or something like that. Cause they screw the self-pay person because you don't have anybody to negotiate the contracts fees on that stuff. So
I'm not rolling over easy.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrible. Well, are you better though? That's the more important thing.
I've turned a corner. Yeah, that was some pretty bad pain, but after 3 weeks, I was a lot better. I felt human, and I'm leaving next week. I'll still probably have some of the lesions. I got a little bit of pain, but it's quite a lot less. I can travel like this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, goodness, I'm sorry to hear that, Kat. It is frustrating. I
was shocked. I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be a $5,000 bill. And I got the bill. It was 26,000. I'm like, what? That wasn't even in the realm of reality.
Where was the diagnosis?
In Sonoma, like the middle of like wine country in California.
No, but where did they actually make the shingles diagnosis at? Was it your primary care physician?
Oh, I made it when I finally looked at him. I realized what it was. And then I came home to my primary care and PA are very cool, gone into private practice. They're very on board with, they're great doctors.
Well, here's what I would do. Because you disputing it, they're listening to that, whatever, and they're, because they have bigger lawyers than you do, and they just friggin' harass you. Just get your primary care physician to say the diagnosis was obvious upon proper physical examination. Anybody with, a basic medical education, if they would have bothered to look at you as you presented and properly examined you, would have been able to obviously see this diagnosis, and you would have not needed the CT scan. You would have not needed all this crap that they threw at you.
I put all that in a formal letter that they have.
Right, if your physician saw you a couple of days later and made the diagnosis, ask them, say, would you mind writing a letter saying this was quite an this is, or even if you have their notes, it said this was on presentation, Miss Bacon had blah, 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 obvious lesions on her in a dermatomal pattern consistent with shingles. That's what you're saying, because you could say, if you think it necessary, I'm going to sue you guys for not misdiagnosis. You misdiagnosed me and you subjected me to harm. You subjected me to unnecessary radiation. You subjected me to unnecessary drugs, whatever. It's like, and just play hardball with them. That's what I do.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm furious about it. So anyway, I don't need this on the brink of leaving for 2 months, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Well, if I can find a lawyer that
Yeah.
or go to bed. I know, and it's such a pain because you gotta have these guys, you gotta have these people that will, they cost money, and it's just, it's like, I don't know, it's frustrating to me. All right. Anybody else got anything? I normally I'd have to run and do a consult right now, but I don't have one, so I can stick around for a few more minutes. So I'll do that just because that way I don't have to go grade my kids' math homework. No, I'm just kidding. I gotta go see how he's doing. He still needs a few more minutes, I'm sure. I gave him some pretty tough problems to see if he'll figure out. So anyway, well, like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. I think I'll have to double check with Felice, but we may just have these open style meetings all week, which will be fun for me because I like the ability to kind of just chat and ask questions and stuff like that, and chat, and see what you guys are up to. Of course, I like doing the success stories or so I'll have to see what Felice is up to. Maybe she just didn't upload it to the calendar yet. So, what else do we got? So I'll go back to YouTube real quick, see if, what else? What do you think of Dr. Allo? So that's a guy I've seen him on in my Twitter feed, and he's a guy that's like, Carnivore's bad, and it's all about ApoB and this type of stuff. And that's pretty, and I think he's a cardiologist. And so, I mean, the problem is that one, it's not all about heart disease. Even if he were 100% correct and saturated fat directly cause heart disease, which the studies don't support, they clearly don't support that. Now, you might make an assumption that higher cholesterol is associated and is even causal, particularly the ApoB fragment for cardiovascular disease. And that argument has been made by many, many people. And there's many people believe that conditionally. Now, there's people like myself will say that, hold on a second, it may be that ApoB in conjunction with something is causal. And most people have that secondary in conjunction with, right? That is to say, if you have, there's an interesting study out there that looks at triglyceride rich LDL versus triglyceride poor LDL. Even though they're both types of LDL, the triglyceride rich one is more likely to become atherogenic. Oxidized, is more likely to be atherogenic. And so it may be that, most people have some degree of triglyceride rich or oxidized LDL. And because most people have that, there's a pretty tight correlation. But what happens if you have people that don't have that? Like what I presume some of us, we're not subject to as much oxidation. Clearly low carbohydrate diets drive down triglycerides in most cases. So is that a different situation? But beyond that, even if you say, hey, this is conditional and it's dependent variable, which I think it is. I think ApoB, LDL, whatever you want to say, is a dependent variable for cardiovascular disease. And most people do have those conditions that lead to that. But when we have this different cohort, and I know people, there's no proof of that yet. It's coming. I mean, it's coming out there. I mean, Dave Feldman's study, I think, is one that certainly strongly hints toward that. I mean, all of us, as we continue to live this lifestyle free of cardiovascular disease, or at least it seems to be the case, we may know, maybe we'll know in 10, 20 years. Who knows? I mean, I think most of us are willing to take that chance, right? To be the guinea pigs, to be the pioneers on this stuff. And, I mean, people should be thanking us. Hey guys, you're out there taking a risk so that we can find this stuff out, because maybe it's wrong. And, instead of being demonized, oh, how dare you people? Hey, good luck on you. I hope it turns out well for you. Maybe we'll learn something out of this, because, like I say, let's say, 100,000 of us do this, and it's very likely to be the case. And our rates of cardiovascular disease are lower than the average population. And in fact, even much lower than the average population. So what do you conclude from that? Well, I mean, a honest scientist would say, well, it seems like maybe meat doesn't cause heart disease, right? Which there's never been a randomized control trial that would suggest that it does. But I mean, even if it's wrong, even if, say, we've increased our risk for heart disease, right? It's not all about heart disease. I mean, there's so many other things that are out there and go into quality of life, pain, chronic pain, obesity, autoimmune disease, gut health, mental health. So many of us have improved all those things, and you guys have heard me. I interview people and I say, hey guys, hey, Mr. Jones, hey, Mrs. Jones, you go through all this stuff in your life, your quality of life is better. Would you go back, would you trade what you have now for a 20% decrease in risk of heart disease? And almost to a woman, they'll say, no, hell no, I would never change that because I feel so much better now. And so I think that's something that, as a physician, I'm just like, hey, I'll give you advice, would you do what you want, and to sit there and tell people that they have to toe the line because of heart disease, which again, may or may not be relevant in our case, is to me insane. But, you get people that will continue to kind of push that narrative. All right. Neil has said, not a proper question, but recently added more fat to my diet and found that my stool became more formed after 7 years of ulcerative colitis. But then also after the first stool at night, I had liquid stool, so more fat. I did ground beef, 93.7%. Should I not do so much fat, or is it normal? And should I keep eating this fat percentage? Well, no, first of all, with ulcerative colitis, you don't have a normal bowel, right? And it may be normalizing, but if you're still at symptomatic ulcerative colitis, you have maybe ulcers in your gut. This is the whole thing you think. So the absorption capacity, the physiology of the gut is by definition basically been altered. What I will speak to is that people without ulcerative colitis or supposedly normal gut or relatively normal gut function will find that there is a threshold for fat. And when they exceed that threshold for fat, they end up with diarrhea. They end up with steatorrhea. They just can't absorb that amount of fat. And so you may have to play with that. And, I tell people, hey, if you're eating a carnivore diet, your energy's got to come from somewhere. So it's most likely coming from fat. Protein is not a great source of energy. We can convert some of it. We can convert some of that to energy, either glucose or ketones. Amino acids have, basically a couple of states. They can turn into ketones, things like leucine. A couple of the amino acids are exclusively ketogenic. Most of them are gluconeogenic, and some are mixed. Some can turn both glucose and ketones depending on the needs. But they're not really great sources of energy. Fat is a much better, carbs are a good source of energy. Fat is a good source of energy. And, to fuel yourself, you need a certain amount of energy, 2,000 calories a day, 2,500 calories a day, whatever it might be. There's only so much protein you're going to eat. You're going to eat 200 grams of protein. That's 800 calories. You need another 1,700 calories of fat. So that's 150 grams of fat or something like, 180 grams of fat, 190 grams of fat. And, you may only tolerate 40 grams at a pop, so if you need 190 and you only tolerate 40, well, then you got to eat, basically 5 meals a day, so you just have to figure out how much fat you can tolerate in one sitting. Now, if you tolerate 100 grams of fat and you only need 190, then you only got to eat twice a day, but it varies. And then there's the types of fat, rendered fat. When you're eating ground beef, most of the fat is going to be rendered out, when you cook it. Then when you cook, when anybody's in there in a skillet of ground beef, there's all the grease that cooks out, and some of it you eat, some of it ends up in the trash or down the sink. Like for me, if you're lazy, chase it with a bunch of hot water and soap. Hopefully it'll clog your pipes up. But, and so the rendered fat tends to be less well tolerated from a gastric or from a digestive absorption capacity than does whole fat. Like I always talk about the difference between, a well-marbled steak and some ground beef. A well-marbled steak, the fat is still locked in the matrix. It's still in a real semi-solid form, and it's broken down very slowly, and it's released into the duodenum in a fairly slow capacity mixed with the amino acids. Whereas rendered fats, melted butter, tallow, whatever, ghee, butter, bacon grease, hamburger fat, pure liquid, and it just kind of runs right through. It doesn't need to be in the stomach very long because there's nothing the stomach's going to do to it. Solid food, your stomach needs to churn it. It needs to bathe in an acid to break down the bigger components, to turn it into a liquid, to then, slowly dump into your duodenum. But if it's already liquefied, then it just runs right out. Your stomach quickly sorts it out. It kind of runs to the bottom. It sits there in the you know, lower part of the stomach and just squirts out, you know, into that through that you know, through that gastric duodenal junction area and just goes right in there, and it overwhelms the capacity to absorb it. So if you know, if anybody, you know, if you 2 sticks of butter in a row, most of us are going to be on the toilet, you know, in about 30 minutes, because it's going to run right through you guys like a goose, you know, just goes right through. So anyway, those are some thoughts on that. Would liquid fat be easier to digest for colitis people? No, I don't think so. No, because I think, you know, when we're talking about digesting, right? Remember, it's digested in the small intestine, not the colon. The colon is not where you're typically absorbing much of the fat. It's going to be mostly in the small intestine through, and this is why we have bile. Bile is an emulsifying agent, so it's a detergent that basically it does the same thing. Like if you put fat, you know, if you take soap and you pour it into fat, it, you know, breaks down the fat into smaller little globules. That's the same thing that happens in our gut. So the bile breaks down all the fat in really small globules, and then it's acted upon by the different lipase enzymes that are secreted by the pancreas. And so then they're broken down even further, and then they're absorbed along the small intestine, the intestinal villi in the small intestine. So again, liquid fat, concentrated liquid fat in high amount is just going to overwhelm that capacity. And so it's just going to run right through you and end up in your colon. So you're going to have all this fat going in your colon, and your colon's not going to really absorb much of it. You know, there's going to be a little, but not much. So then it's just going to end up in the toilet. So you're going to have diarrhea most likely. So I would stick to whole, I mean, not exclusively, but you know, you're going to be able to probably better tolerate, you know, whole fats, because, you know, as human beings, we were not dealing with a lot of liquid fat, you know, evolutionarily. I mean, we didn't, you know, butter wasn't even invented till, I don't know, 10,000 years ago, whenever we started domesticating cows and, you know, whenever we started, you know, doing that stuff. So we didn't have these liquid fats around for a long time. Even milk, you know, is a lot of protein, you know, it's protein and carbs and fat. So it's a mixture, you know, but again, and I'm not a big fan of drinking calories in the first place, but anyway, okay. Anybody else got anything? Any other YouTubers got another question here? All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for today, guys. I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you guys. I'm going to shut down YouTube.